The waitress marries homeless man just to take him to her grandmother's birthday, but finds out he's a billionaire CEO. The only reason I married him was so my dying grandmother wouldn't feel alone on her last birthday. That's what everyone thought. No one knew the truth. The man in the ragged coat, holding my hand in the family photo, he was the one who once shattered my entire world. And now, years later, he stood beside me, homeless, Sila Quinta. The day I found him, he was lying beside the bus stop bench, motionless, wrapped in an old military coat that had lost its color from too many storms. People walked past. Some wrinkled their noses. Others whispered. But I stopped. I don't know what. Maybe it was the way he curled inwards, like someone who'd once known tenderness and now flinched at the world. Maybe it was the photo in my purse, the one of Grandma smiling with her oxygen tank and frail hands, asking me if I'd ever bring someone home before she turned 89. Or maybe, deep down, I recognized something in his silence, something that felt familiar. I nudged him gently. He stirred, startled, but didn't speak. "Do you need help?" I asked. His eyes met mine, and in them I saw grief, the kind of grief that doesn't cry, the kind that settles like ash in the soul. He didn't beg, didn't plead, just shook his head, trying to vanish into the sidewalk cracks. But I couldn't walk away. So I did something crazy. Something no one in my family, or in their perfect little world, would understand. I brought him home. Just for one night. Just to clean him up, just to give him a hot meal. And just maybe ask a favor. Because my grandmother had asked me one last thing before she slipped into palliative care. "Ellie, sweet, will you bring someone to my birthday? I just want to see you loved before I go." I didn't have a boyfriend. I didn't have time for love, not after what happened 4 years ago. Not after him. So I looked at this man, this stranger with haunted eyes, and I asked, "Will you pretend to be my husband for one day?" He froze. Then, for the first time, he spoke. His voice was hoarse, like he hadn't used it in weeks. I told him the truth. Because Grandma deserved joy. Because my family wouldn't let me attend unless I looked settled. Because I was tired of being the failure at every table. He didn't ask for much. He didn't even ask for a name. He just said, "All right." He bought him a shirt from Goodwill. I trimmed his beard in my kitchen sink. And when he slipped a fake gold ring onto his finger, he looked at it too long, too carefully, as if it reminded him of something. I ignored the chill in my chest. We rehearsed our story, met at the library, married quietly, just two souls trying to find peace. It was just a performance. But when we walked into that birthday party hand in hand, something happened. I didn't expect. My grandmother saw us, reached for our fingers, and I knew he'd come back for you. What? Before I could ask her what she meant, she coughed. Hard. The nurse rushed in. I turned to the man beside me, but he had gone pale. As if he knew. As if he remembered something on it. That night, after we tucked Grandma into bed, I found him sitting alone on the porch swing. The ring on his finger shimmered under the moonlight. And then, he said it. "If I hadn't walked away from you that night, everything might have been different." I stared at him, my heart stopped. He looked up, and in that moment the man I thought was a stranger became someone I had buried in memory. The man who left. The man I thought had died in the car crash that night. Ethan Blake. Billionaire heir. Vanished after the scandal. Presumed dead. You caught. Now sitting on my porch, broken, bearded, pretending to be a stranger. My fake husband was my real And suddenly my world began to shatter again. Session 1. The ring he never took off. It was almost midnight when I stood at the kitchen sink, my hands trembling as I scrubbed the same plate over and over again, trying to make sense of what just happened. Ethan Blake. The name I hadn't spoken in 4 years. The name I used to whisper in my sleep once upon a time. He sat outside in silence, as if the truth between us had never been buried alive in the wreckage of that night, as if he hadn't disappeared with no trace, no goodbye, no funeral. And now here he was alive, in my house, wearing a ring that used to be his grandmother's. My ring. He walked out onto the porch. He didn't look at me. He rocked gently on the old swing my dad built years ago, back when he still believed in fixing things. "You were supposed to be dead," I said, voice sharp. The swing creaked beneath him. He still wouldn't look up. "Car caught fire. They said no one could have survived." They were wrong. His words fell between us like a brick. He stepped closer. "Where did you go, Ethan?" Finally he looked at me, and I saw the weight behind his eyes, the kind that only comes from losing everything. "It was in the passenger seat," he whispered, "but it wasn't me they buried. My friend, Michael. We switched seats before we left the bar. I was too drunk, he offered to drive." I felt the blood drain from my face. He found his ID in my jacket. He didn't make it. I did. My breath caught in my throat. "You let me think you died." He nodded slowly. "I had nothing to come back to," he said. "Everything I touched was ruined." "That's not your choice to make," I shouted, eyes burning. "You destroyed me, Ethan. You broke me." He stood then, faster than I expected for someone who looked like he hadn't eaten properly in days. "I loved you, Ellie. That's the only—" His voice cracked. He watched from a distance. "I saw you rebuild. I thought, maybe it was better if you never saw me again." Tears streamed down my face. "Then why now?" I asked. "Why show up at a bus stop with a ring you never gave back?" He pulled the ring off and held it in his palm. "I never took it off," he said simply. Then, softer, "until tonight." He froze. "Tonight?" He looked at me with an honesty so raw it nearly undid me. "While you slid this ring onto my finger, you didn't recognize me, but I recognized you, your hands, your scent, the way you still bite your lip when you're nervous. I thought I was a sick joke," he added. "God, I thought I'd finally gone mad." I took a shaky step back, the world spinning. "Then why go through with it? Why agree to pretend? You could have walked away." He gave a half smile, the first one I'd seen in years. "Because your grandmother looked at me like I was home, and I haven't had that feeling since before the crash." My heart broke all over again. I wanted to scream, I wanted to run. But instead I reached out and touched the— "I buried this," I whispered. "I buried you with it." His voice dropped low. "You buried someone else." The wind picked up, brushing against us like the breath of a memory. Inside I could hear the soft hum of my family, laughing, music from the old record player, Grandma's nurse humming Blue Moon. This was supposed to be pretend, a one-night act. But now I was looking into the eyes of a ghost. And my heart, damn it, was still tethered to his. The next morning I found him asleep on the couch, curled up like a child. The light from the window hit the side of his face, just right. And for a moment I saw the boy I used to love. Back when we were unstoppable, before the scandal, before the crash, before the press tore us apart. He stirred as I approached. "You should go," I said quietly. He opened his eyes, and for a second I could tell he expected that. "You will," he said, "but not before I say goodbye to her." He nodded. "Owe her that much. It would already be quadrupled up." I didn't understand what he meant, until later that afternoon. She was sitting on the porch in her rocking chair, wrapped in a quilt, eyes glassy from pain meds. When she saw him she smiled. Her fingers reached for his, like muscle memory. "My boy," she whispered. He knelt before her, tears filling his eyes. "I'm sorry," he said. "What, darling?" she whispered. "For everything." She cupped his cheek. "You always come home, Ethan. That's what matters." I felt the ground shift, but— "Wait," I whispered. Grandma turned to me, smiling through the fog of her illness. "He called me once, from a payphone said he couldn't come back yet, but he was alive. I never told you. I thought it would hurt more if you waited. The betrayal sliced through me like a blade, but so did the relief. She knew, and she kept it secret to protect me. I'd identified a door. I didn't know whether to cry or scream. But then Ethan turned to me, eyes softened. If I hadn't left that night, if I had stayed, maybe we'd be married for real by now. His words echoed. If I hadn't walked away from you that night, everything might have been different. And somewhere inside me, something cracked open. Not forgiveness, not yet, but something like possibility. A door. And this time I wasn't the one closing it. Section to the will she never read. The letter was hidden behind a loose panel in Grandma's old jewelry box, the one with the faded velvet lining and the broken clasp she refused to throw away. You found it by accident. After Ethan left the porch that afternoon, I went to her room, needing to be alone, to breathe, to make sense of the storm that had walked through our door in the form of a man I thought I'd buried. But what I found was something else entirely. A sealed envelope, yellowed at the edges, but the handwriting unmistakable. To Ellie, if I'm gone and he comes back. My fingers trembled. I looked over my shoulder as if someone might stop her. Then I sat on the edge of her bed and tore it open. My sweet Eleanor. You're reading this, I'm probably gone. And if he's back, well then, I was right. I know you. I raised you, and I knew the moment he left you stopped believing in love. You pretended well, the way you smiled, how you cared for me, the strength you showed to everyone in this family. I saw it all. But you stopped laughing when he died. You stopped dancing in the kitchen. You stopped living. So I need to tell you the truth now, because you deserve it. You had kept something from you. Something your father... My breath caught. He mentioned Dad. He'd passed from a heart attack 2 years earlier, stoic, proud, and as distant with emotion as a winter storm. Ethan didn't just love you. He tried to come back for you. The first time your father turned him away, told him you were moving on, that you were better off. The second time he left something for you. And never get it. It's in the safe, behind the old church ledger. Combination still 914. Your birthday, not mine. I couldn't bear to see you fall apart again. But not baby, you're strong enough. Love always. Grandma Ruth. I sat frozen, my mind spinning, my chest tightening, my throat clenched with something like rage or guilt, or both. If she knew, and she didn't just keep his secret. We held back his second chance. And my own father had stood at the door and shut it in Ethan's face. I stood up so fast I nearly knocked over the side table. The safe was in the closet, a wall safe behind a row of winter coats no one touched anymore. I hadn't opened it in years. I keyed in the combination with shaking hands. 914. The day Ethan had proposed 4 months before the accident. The dial clicked, the door opened, and there was a small velvet box, and a second letter with the initials E. I don't know if you'll ever read this. Maybe your grandmother will burn it. Maybe your father will throw it in a drawer and forget. But if by some miracle you're holding this now, I need you to know, I never stopped loving you. Not even when he lost everything. Not even when I woke up in that hospital, face bandaged, ribs shattered, my name listed as dead. I didn't come back right away because I was broken. Not just my body, my soul. I thought I'd drag you into my wreckage. But then I tried. Twice. Your father told me you didn't want me anymore, that you were marrying someone new, that you'd moved on. It's shit, but I still left you something. If you're holding this, then maybe you're ready. I still love you, always have, always will. And if we meet again by accident or by grace, I'll spend every day proving to you that I'm still the man you once believed in. The tears fell before I realized they'd started. I curled up on the floor beside the open safe, holding that velvet box to my chest. Inside was the engagement ring I thought I'd lost. The one Ethan had custom made, with a pale sapphire in the center, because he said diamonds were too obvious, and I deserved something rare. My breath shook as I opened the lid. It still fit, and I hated him for that. I hated that he kept loving me through the silence. I hated that he tried, but most of all, I hated that part of me still wanted him to try again. That evening, as the sun melted down the horizon, I walked into the kitchen, clutching the 2 letters and the ring. Grandma was sitting at the table looking out the window, her oxygen tank wheezing softly beside her. "You lied to me," I said. She didn't flinch. "I protected you," she replied. "You kept his letter. You hid the ring. You let me think he abandoned me." She met my gaze with eyes too tired to lie. "I watched you fall apart after the crash. You wouldn't eat. You didn't sleep. You stopped being my girl." "You made a choice," I whispered, "for me." "Yes," she said, voice thin, "because I thought love had killed you." I sat down across from her. "It didn't," I whispered. "It was the absence of it that did." She closed her eyes, a tear escaping down her cheek. "Then maybe it's time you let it back in." That night, we found Ethan sitting outside again. Same swing, same silence. They put the box on the railing beside him. He looked down, and he found it. "He found both," I said, "the letter and the truth." He didn't say anything, just nodded. "Why didn't you tell me yourself?" I asked. He looked up. "Because he thought you'd throw me out?" I almost did. He gave a sad smile. "You still can." I reached into my coat and pulled out the ring. "Can I help you?" "I buried this with you once," I whispered, "but you're not dead, and neither is this." He looked at me, eyes wide, lips parting with disbelief. "I'm not promising anything," I said. "Not yet. But I am saying this, if you want to try again, if you're really here for the long road." He stood. "I am," he said, before I could even finish. "But I'll care how long it takes. I'll show you every day, Ellie. I'll show you that I never stop choosing you." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. And in that quiet, flickering moment, beneath the stars, with my grandmother's porch light casting a golden glow, I knew. This wasn't the end of a love story. It was the beginning of a second one. Session 3, The Fiancé Who Never Was. 3 days after Ethan found the ring on my porch rail, I got a phone call I never expected. The screen lit up with a name I hadn't. Ryan Callahan. My stomach turned. But 10 minutes later, a sleek black car rolled into the gravel driveway of the farmhouse, like a snake sliding through grass. I knew that car. I'd ridden in its leather seats. I'd once dreamed of a life in its passenger side. Now it felt like a memory I wanted to scrub from my bones. He stepped out wearing a gray coat too expensive for this town, his hair perfectly styled, his posture as arrogant as I remembered. Ryan Callahan always looked like a man who could buy the room, because more often than not he had. And yet when our eyes met, I saw something new, a flicker of desperation beneath the smirk. "Ellie," he said, walking up like we hadn't left things in pieces. He stood on the porch, arms crossed. "You shouldn't be here." He gave a soft laugh. "You look well. What do you want?" He looked up and yet past me, eyes searching the house. I heard Ethan's alive. The words hung in the air like smoke. "You trudge, Bucky." He stepped closer. Funny how fast a ghost can come back when there's money involved. My jaw tightened. "You have 30 seconds, Ryan, then you get back in that overpriced hearse and leave." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something that made my knees weaken. A prenup. Sealed, dated 1.5 years ago. With my name on it. My hand shook. "What is this?" I asked, my voice sharp. He tilted his head. "A contract." "I never married you." "No," he said smoothly, "but you were going to, and in this state, intentions matter." "That's not how the law works," I shot back. He smiled. "No, but public That night, I told Ethan everything. About how after the accident, when I believed he was gone forever, I met Raya through my father's business circles. How in a moment of weakness and loneliness I let myself believe I could move on. How I said yes when he proposed, only to call it off weeks before the wedding when I caught him in a hotel lobby with my best friend. I told Ethan how ashamed I'd been, not just for trusting Raya, but for almost letting him become part of this family, for almost letting him into the room where my grandmother prayed. Ethan didn't flinch. He just nodded slowly. "I'm not angry," he said. "I wasn't here. You were grieving. You tried to survive." His eyes locked onto mine. "But if he threatens you again, I won't be so forgiving." The next morning a letter was slid under my door. Typed, formal, illegal sounding. Maison de Maiclort. As per our previously signed agreement and the advance payment rendered during wedding arrangements, I am entitled to restitution should our engagement be deemed a breach without mutual consent. Consider this a notice to settle the matter discreetly, or publicly. Eosion. Ryan Callahan. He folded the letter carefully, then burned it in the kitchen sink. But Ryan wasn't done. The next Sunday he showed up at church. He'd never set foot there before, not even when we were engaged, and suddenly there he was, shaking hands with Deacon Harris, smiling at widows in their Sunday best. My stomach dropped when I saw him chatting with my grandmother, who looked more confused than charmed. He pulled her aside as soon as he walked off. "What did he say to you?" Her eyes were cloudy, her voice faint. Said he was praying for us, that he still hoped for a wedding one day. I saw red. That night Ethan sat me down. He poured me tea the way he always used to. 2 sugars, no milk. "We need to tell people the truth," he said quietly. "About us." "I'm not ready," I whispered. "Not yet. Everything's still so—" He nodded. But that night, I couldn't sleep. Because I knew Ryan. He didn't want me. He wanted the land, the inheritance, the name that came with being linked to our family. And if he couldn't marry it, he had ruined. The next week Grandma took a turn for the worse. Her breathing was shallow, her hands colder, her eyes losing their light. And suddenly Ryan's threats didn't matter as much as time. Time to make things right. Time to tell her the truth. So Ethan and I sat beside her one evening, holding hands like we used to before the world burned. And I whispered, "He's back. Ethan's back. And I love him." Her eyes fluttered open. And for the briefest second the sparkle returned. "I knew you'd find your way home," she said. Then, almost imperceptibly, she turned to Ethan. "You forgive it?" she asked. Ethan nodded. "I already have." And in that moment I knew the past wasn't chains anymore. It was soil, the kind we could grow something real in. 3 days later she passed peacefully, wrapped in her favorite quilt, my hand in hers. She didn't get to see the wedding, but she got to see the truth. The funeral was quiet, until Ryan showed up in a tailored black suit, standing by the gravestone smiling faintly, like a man who had already written the next chapter. After the ceremony I walked up to him. "I'm not afraid of you," I said. He raised an eyebrow. "You should be." I handed him a letter. One he sent, one from his ex-assistant, with photos from his vape, and a notarized confession of how he'd tried to coerce me into a prenup with falsified language, knowing I was vulnerable, grieving, and not of sound mind. "Try me in court," I said. "I dare you." He read the paper slowly. Then laughed. "You've changed, Ellie." "No," I said. "I just stopped mistaking wolves for saviors." That night, Ethan stood beside me on the porch again. Same swing, same silent, but everything had changed. "I think I'm ready," I whispered. He turned to me, eyes soft. "You're right. You loved that ring." He smiled, then reached to his pocket and pulled out the ring. This time he slid it on my finger. "Not a ghost, not a ghost, but a promise." For a future no one could steal. Session 4. The CEO with no. The morning after Grandma's funeral, I found Ethan staring at the horizon from the barn loft. He didn't hear me come in. He was holding a worn photograph, creased, faded. A group of men in suits, smiled, but one face had been torn out. "What's that?" I asked. "It's Stefan." Jean returned, his expression unreadable. "It was something I should have told you weeks ago." He stepped closer, heart thudding. "What do you mean?" He held up the photo. "That's me. Or it was." I frowned. "Ethan, I don't understand." He set the photo down beside a thin leather-bound journal, the initials ELH embossed in gold. "It wasn't just gone, Ellie. I was..." He told me everything. That his real name wasn't Ethan Clark. That 2 years ago, after a hostile takeover of his tech company Stratos Labs, he'd been forced out by the board. Men who had once called him brother. He'd signed the papers under duress after a car accident nearly killed him, a car crash that he now believed wasn't an accident at all. He'd disappeared afterward, fled the public eye, burned his IDs, took his mother's maiden name. "Why didn't you tell me?" I whispered. "Because I didn't want you to love a name," he said. "I wanted you to love the man underneath it." "But you were a CEO," I said, stunned. He was, until they took everything except this. He touched the old locket around his neck. Inside was a photo of the two of us, taken the summer we planted the apple trees behind the house. That photo was all he'd kept. Later that day I searched his name. Loga Lane Huxley. No social media. No photos. No official records. It was like someone had scrubbed him from history. But I thought one clue. A single Reddit thread, buried under conspiracy theories. Whatever happened to Elijah Huxley from Stratos Labs? Guy vanished after signing over the company. Weirdest part? His name got replaced on the patents, rewritten, as if he never existed. There were backroom deals. One comment chilled me. Word is he was set up, took the fall for a product that failed, but insiders say the failure was deliberate. Someone wanted him out. Clean. I closed the laptop with shaking hands and realized I wasn't just in love with a man coming back from grief. I was in love with a man fighting to reclaim his name. That night he found Ethan in the shed fixing a broken radio. He was always fixing things. But I saw it now, the deeper to restore what was stolen. "What if we made it public?" I asked. He looked up surprised. "The truth, your story. Everything." He shook his head. "Then we scream louder," I said. "We show the world who you are." He smiled faintly. "Would you fight for a man without a name?" "Because you never stopped being him," I said softly. "Even when the world forgot, I didn't." Over the next week we got to work. We gathered receipts. Emo chain. Old hard drives he'd kept hidden. And I made the call. To someone I hadn't spoken to in years. My cousin Katie, a legal analyst with a sharp tongue and a sharper sense of justice. He arrived 3 days later in boots, jeans, and fury. "Knew those Stratos suits were snakes," she said, flipping through the contracts Ethan had signed while drugged in a hospital bed. "This clause is illegal in 3 states," she muttered, "and this signature's forged. Hell, you could sue them blind." "They don't want Katie looked up. "Then what do you want?" He paused. 2 weeks later, Ethan agreed to a single interview. On camera. Inaudible. At first. A dimly lit room, his words clear as fire. "They took everything, my company, my patents, even my birth certificate. But they couldn't take my mind, or my integrity. And now, I'm coming back." The video hit 2 million views in 2 days. Then something strange happened. Stratos Labs went silent. No PR statement, no denial. Just clank. Until one morning, an envelope appeared on our door. No return address. And so a single photo. It was Ethan, bleeding in the hospital. His shadow in the back row, standing at the edge of the room. Ryan Callahan. What the hell is he doing there? I gasped. Ethan took the photo, stared at it, and said 4 words that chilled me. I think he knew. You were planning it, that the crash wasn't an accident. My stomach. Ryan was part of this. Ethan nodded. And for the first time he saw not just betrayal, but that night I couldn't sleep. Because suddenly the past wasn't just full of pain. It was full of players. And we were stepping back into a game where the stakes weren't just money or reputation, but life. 1 week later, Ethan received a formal notice from a federal court. The patents under Stratos Labs were being reviewed for authorship fraud. The lawsuit was real. The government had launched a probe. And Ethan's name? It was on the table again. But not everyone was happy. A brick came through our window at midday, wrapped in a piece of paper that said, "You walk away or you won't walk again." Ethan picked it up slowly. He looked at me and said, "We're close. That's why they're scared." The next morning we got a call, live on national radio, from a woman named Margot Vance, a retired board member from Stratos. "I saw what they did to Elijah," she said. "He built that company with his bare hands, and they silenced him. But the truth always comes back. You can't bury the sun." Her voice cracked. "He was a coward, but I'm not anymore. I'll testify." It was the crack we needed. And suddenly the man with no name, who had a voice again. In the barn that night, Ethan kissed me like a man returned from war, and whispered, "I don't need to be famous. I don't need to be rich." He looked at me. "I just want a name you can say at the altar." He smiled. "I already have one. Session 5, the woman who knew too much." I never meant to open that box. It was buried under Grandma's old piano bench, sealed with a strip of linen, the dust thick as grief. But the storm that night had knocked down the attic vent, and I went up to fix it, only to find the corner of a faded box poking from behind the cedar chest. I should have left it alone. But something, curiosity, fate, God, made me pull it out. Inside a stack of letters, tied with blue ribbon, and a photograph. My father, standing next to Ryan Callahan. And behind them, a young man with dark curls, bright eyes, and a proud smile. Ethan. But the name printed in the corner of the glossy photo? Illigel Huxley, founder, Stratos Labs. My breath caught. I flipped over the first letter. Addressed to Con. My full name. It was a sender he had never known. Ellie. If you're reading this, it means the truth couldn't stay buried forever. Your father and I were once part of something we couldn't control. But I'm begging you, don't trust the board, don't trust Ryan. And whatever you do, protect Elijah. He was never the enemy. Love. Margot Vance. My knees buckled. Margot, the woman who'd just gone on live radio to defend Ethan, had written me years ago. And my family had hidden it. It confronted my mother first. He was quiet as he read the letter out loud. When he held up the photo, her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't deny it. "I tried to keep you safe," she whispered, "from your father's world, from what they did." "Did what?" I snapped. "Lie, betray, help destroy Ethan's life." "He called it business," she said bitterly, "but I called it blood money." The truth spilled like oil. My father had been one of the original investors in Stratos Labs. A silent banker, low profile, big pockets. He helped fund Ethan's dream, but when the to salvage public trust, to save the stock price. It was politics, Ellie, Mom whispered, but Ethan, he trusted him, like a second father. My stomach turned, and for the first time, I realized this wasn't just Ethan's betrayal. It was mine too. That night he told Ethan everything. He expected him to explode, to walk out. But he didn't. He just stared out the barn window at the lightning slicing through the sky. "Your dad was the last one I shook hands with before signing the papers," he said quietly. I looked him in the eye, and he said, "This is for the good of the company, son." He paused. I didn't know he meant the end of me. "I'm not him," I said, voice shaking. "I'm not part of that." He turned to me, and in his eyes I didn't see blame. He saw something deeper. Sutton. And love. "You're the only thing that feels true, Ellie. That's why they couldn't break me." But we both knew this was bigger than us now. Stratos was preparing for its biggest product launch yet, a new neural interface called Voxmond. Ethan believed it was built off his stolen prototypes. And if he could prove it, it would shake the tech world to its knees. But someone else was watching us now, following us. I saw the same black car outside the general store, opposite the lawyer's office, even behind the church during Grandma's memorial. Then one day an envelope was slipped under our front door. Inside, a flash drive, labeled, "The Last Backup." Ethan plugged it in, and froze. It was a blueprint, what only he could have written, with a time skip from 3 weeks after his supposed resignation. "They used my ideas. After I was gone," he said, voice flat. "They kept me on the server, ghosted me in code." "But how did this even get to us?" I asked. He turned the flash drive over. Etched in the plastic was a single name. Katie. My cousin. The lawyer. He had infiltrated Stratos' legal branch 2 years ago. He never told us, but she'd been leaking documents ever since. She met us that night in the barn, rain pounding the roof like war drums. It was part of their legal counsel, she admitted, but when I saw the contracts they made Ethan sign, I couldn't live with it. She handed him another file. A deposition, signed by Margot Vance. The whistleblower's statement, detailing everything. The sabotage, the forged accident report, the boardroom votes, the role of Thomas Mouse, my father. It was enough to bury them. But it came with a cost. Margaret had won. And the very next day, Katie's car was run off the... He survived, but barely. "She knew too much," I whispered. Ethan nodded grimly. "So do you now." That night, he held me like I was made of glass. "I can walk away from all of it," I whispered, "if it means keeping you safe." He pulled back just enough to look me in the eye. "But I can't," he said, "because if we run now, the truth stays buried, and they win." I knew he was right. But I also knew this war would demand a price. And some... much mine. Not his. Not even my father's. As dawn broke, Ethan turned to me and asked, "Ellie, if we lose everything but the truth, will you still choose me?" I've already lost everything before, but I've never had someone worth fighting with. And for the first time in years. He smiled. Session 6. The launch, the lie, and the legacy. They say billion-dollar lies wear tuxedos. That morning, Stratos Labs' VOC Mayam's launch looked like a coronation. The crystal chandeliers. Red carpet lined with tech reporters. Billboards flashed phrases like "Reimagine intelligence," and "The future is now." But only Ethan and I knew the future they were selling wasn't theirs to sell. Ethan stood in the alley behind the glass towers of Stratos HQ, his suit wrinkled from travel, a flash drive clenched in his fist. He hadn't slept. Our plan was reckless, illegal, dangerous. But so was what they did to him. He looked at me before we went in and asked just one question. "If they offer you your old life back, would you take it?" My answer came with no hesitation. "Not if it means losing you again." Inside, the launch was already underway. The board sat in tailored rows like royalty, front and center. And at the podium, it was him. My father, Yamusne. He was now executive chairman of Stratos, smiling like he'd invented the code himself. "This is not just the next leap in AI," he declared, voice smooth as marble. "It is the dawn of shared cognition, a future where the mind is the new interface." The room erupted in applause. But Ethan and we slipped backstage where Katie, still recovering, bandaged but fierce, was waiting with a forged access badge and a hidden mic. "This will fry the broadcast line for exactly 60 seconds, she said. "You'll only get one shot." Ethan nodded, and he walked straight onto the stage. The music stopped. He served forward, but my father raised his hand. "Let him speak," he said, smug, as if it couldn't touch him. It couldn't touch him. Ethan stepped to the podium. The flash drive trembled in his fingers. And then he spoke. "My name is Ethan James Callahan. 5 years ago, I was removed as CEO of Stratos Labs." They said on left. He didn't. Murmur, rip. Ethan clicked the flash drive. The big screen behind him lit up with blueprints, emails, VoxMind prototype, all bearing his name. They used my work, my code, my designs. They locked me out of my own dream, and then sold it back to the world as theirs. Gasps. Journalists scrambled to record. Lawyers in the crowd exchanged worried glances. But then came the final blow, and a man who signed the order. It was not the CEO, not the board. It was this man. He turned, pointed directly at Thomas Myers. "My father." The crowd froze. It watched my father's face. It calcified. He stepped forward, slow and steady, microphone in hand. And then, he laughed. "You want a martyr's moment, Ethan? You want to be the tragic hero?" His voice dripped contempt. "You failed. You cracked under pressure. And now, you're trying to burn the temple because you weren't crowned king." The board began to clap, like it was scripted. Truth didn't matter. It felt sick. But then Katie stepped forward. Microphone laughed. "My name is Catherine Vance, corporate counsel. I submitted my resignation an hour ago, because this company is built on theft." He raised the whistleblower deposition. Margot Vance is where he and flashed it to every screen in the hall. The stockade proves that Stratos Labs knowingly suppressed a software bot, blamed its failure on Ethan Callahan, and used that to secure emergency shareholder control. The press surged forward. My father's composure and finally, security swarmed the stage. They took Ethan first. They dragged him toward the exit. Cameras, reporters shouting. But just before they shoved him through the back doors, he turned, "Eyes found mine," and he whispered, "Not so. Not for loving you. Not for fighting." Then he was gone. That night, Stratos Labs trended worldwide. They all knew who I was now. The heiress of a fraud. The lover of the man they'd tried to erase. 3 days later, he met my father alone, in the vineyard where I used to run between the rows as a girl. He poured 2 glasses of wine. He set one in front of me. "I never meant for you to get hurt," he said. I didn't touch the glass. I asked he just one thing. "If you had to do it all over again, would you choose the company or the truth?" He didn't. He didn't have to. His silence told me everything. He left that glass untouched. I never saw him again. 1 week later, Ethan was cleared of all DA violations. The documents Katie leaked triggered a federal investigation. Stratos Labs stock tanked. A new interim CEO was appointed, and the man who once ruled from behind the curtain, he was now the subject of a Senate ethics probe. Ethan and I walked along the beach, near my grandmother's old house. The sky pink, the waves calm. "I don't want a throne," he told me. I just want a place where truth can breathe. And love can live, I added. Without rush each other. And a life built on something real. Session 7, The Baby, the Bell Tower, and the Letter That Changed Everything. Some moments don't arrive with thunder. A whisk of sudden, like the second line on a pregnancy tut. Like the hum of wind through a forgotten bell tower. Like a letter written decades ago that waits patiently until it's time. He didn't scream when he saw the test. Did he cry either? He just sat in the quiet of my grandmother's kitchen, staring at those 2 pink lines like they were Morse code from God. It was carrying Ethan Callahan's child. The man whose name the world was only beginning to remember. The man who had lost everything to the same system that built my lust now. A Monroe and a Callahan. Legacy and outcome. Their love and consequence. Ethan didn't speak at first when I told him. He just reached across the bed and laid his hand gently over my stomach, as if promising the child everything he'd never been given. Vin, so I don't care if it's a boy or girl. I just want them to grow up never wondering if they were wanted. That week I returned to the Monroe estate, alone. Not because I doubted Ethan, but because something pulled me back. Ring. A memory. A bell that never rang anymore. The bell tower stood crooked in the morning mist, beside the old chapel where my grandmother used to sing. The same one where my mother's wedding dress still hung behind the altar, preserved like a shrine. No one had gone up the bell tower in decades. But I had to. Because tucked behind an old frame in the attic, it was something I hadn't touched since the funeral. A letter. Yellowed wax sealed. Addressed to Eleanor. On the day you need to know who you really are. It was in my grandmother's handwriting. I opened it with trembling fingers. And what I read shattered every truth I thought I knew. My darling Ellie, if you are reading this, I am gone, and the family you trust has likely broken your heart. So I will tell you the story. He spoke of my mother, not just as a socialite or heiress, but as a girl in love, with a young, brilliant engineer named Daniel Callahan. Ethan's father. They were in love long before the boardrooms and bridal contracts. Your mother was carrying you when they separated her from him. Because he was brilliant, but poor. My heart stopped. I read the next line over and over. You were not a full Monroe, Ellie. You were born of love, not arrangement. And that is why your father was a re. Everything made sense. Why my mother never remarried. Why Thomas Myers never adopted me, but mentored me. Why Ethan and I had always felt tied long before we met. We were not cousins, not even legally related. But we were children of the same man's war on love. I couldn't breathe, so he climbed to the bell tower. And for the first time in 30 years, I rang the bell. It echoed across the valley like a scream swallowed by time. And somehow I knew Ethan would hear it. That night became. No words, no questions. He stood at the foot of the bell tower, head tilted back, eyes wet. And I told him everything. About our mothers. About Daniel Callahan. About the real reason he was exiled. And why his genius was feared. Because it came from love. And love was uncontrollable. We sat on the chapel steps as the stars came out. Ethan held my hand like it was a vow. If they tried to erase our parents' love, he whispered, as he proclaimed, that our child is the proof they failed. We decided right there. We would not be run. We would not hide. We would raise our child in truth, not legacy, and name them after the man both our mothers loved. Daniel. But before we could Katie drove up just after midnight, headlights cutting through fog. She stepped out of the car, holding a manila folder in her hand. I didn't know if I should give this to you, she said. But I think your father left something inside. A trust document. Signed weeks ago. If Ethan Callahan could prove code authorship, OIP would revert to the original license holder, him, who would co-beneficiary rights to one Eleanor Monroe. It wasn't redemption. It was strategy. Thomas Myers had always played both ends of the chessboard. But this time, he lost. We stood in silence. Ethan, our unborn child. In the wind through the trees like an old song finally returning home. Session 8. The trial, the tabloid, and the woman in white. They said justice was blind. But in this city, justice had a price tag. And the Monroe corporate trial? It was a sold-out show. By the time the subpoenas were issued and headlines broke, Callahan v. Monroe Enterprises, the battle for the billion-dollar code, America had already picked sides. It was blood, betrayal, and love. The courtroom looked more like a red carpet than a seat of justice. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted. A viral video of me holding Ethan's hand as we stepped out of the courthouse car had already hit 6 million views. The guy who switched over, pregnant and dengue, from the Mongo to Callahan, the daughter's defiance. But none of that compared to what we were up against. Thomas Myers, in a perfectly tailored gray suit, flanked by 6 attorneys, he looked like a man mourning nothing. He didn't even flinch when I entered. But the coldest part? He was similar. The prosecution tried to paint Ethan as a bitter ex-employee with delusions of ownership. Mr. Callahan, the lead attorney asked condescendingly, if you did create the code, why didn't you patent it under your name? Ethan didn't hesitate. Because I was 19, and I trusted the wrong man. There was a pause. A murmur through the crowd, then silence, when the judge leaned forward and asked, and who was that man? Ethan looked straight at it and said, the man sitting over there, my godfather, the man who promised to protect my father's work and stole it after he died. The courtroom frowned. And then, the tabloids pounced. That afternoon a full expose broke. The DNA twist: Callahan is the heir to Monroe's hidden river. An anonymous leak had provided Daniel Callahan's old journals. It confirmed the story in my grandmother's letter. That the tech used to build Monroe's foundational software wasn't just Ethan's code. It was his father's, filed under an early pseudonym. The same pseudonym Thomas used to erase the Callahan name. That night, Thomas's team retaliated. With something personal. It leaked my pregnancy. But not just that, I was accused of corporate espionage. Robbery. Falsifying documents. All basic. But in the court of public opinion, I was burning. The next morning I sat on the courtroom bench alone. Ethan had been advised not to appear. The media wanted a show, and we weren't giving it to them. But as the judge entered, something stopped him. When the doors at the back of the courtroom opened slowly. A woman in white walked. Silk blouse, cream skirt, hat low over her eyes. But I knew that walk. I knew that silence. My mother. He hadn't been seen in public in almost 20 years. Rumors said she was institutionalized. Others claimed she lived on a vineyard in Italy. But there she was. And walking straight toward the witness stand. Without invitation. Without fear. And then she removed her sunglasses. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. I'd like to make a statement, she said softly. In behalf of the real Callahan legacy. The judge hesitated, then nodded, and she began to speak. He spoke of her love story with Daniel Callahan. How they met building a software prototype in college. How Thomas came between them, not as a business partner, but as a jealous friend. How he blackmailed Daniel with false patent documents, forcing him to sign over his life's work. And how, when she refused to marry Thomas years later, he took Daniel's code, then erased him. They erased me. It couldn't stop shaking. Neither could Ethan. My mother turned to and in front of an entire courtroom, she said, Ellie Monroe was born of love. Not not profit. I'm not going to let them rewrite her again." The courtroom was stunned, and in that silence the judge asked a simple question. "You have proof?" She reached into her coat and pulled out a flash drive. This is the original version of the Callahan Protocol. It was constant, with Daniel's code signature embedded. He paused. "I kept it safe the 30 years. Because I knew one day, someone would try to kill the truth again." Everything changed. Thomas's lawyers asked for recess. The media changed its headline mid-broadcast. The woman in white monk grip returned to Taft Fort, but she wasn't our enemy. She was our rescue. Later that evening, the courtroom adjourned for the day. And as the sun set outside, I walked into the quiet garden behind the courthouse with my mother. We sat on the stone bench where roses bloomed wild and untended. And she reached for my hand. "I was afraid to come back," she whispered. "But then I saw you on the news, holding his hand. And I remembered what it felt like to love someone when the world told you not to. Way more." But I didn't cry. Not this time. I just whispered back, "If you hadn't come back, I don't know if we would have won." He smiled, tired but soft. "You haven't won yet. But now at least, you're not alone."
Mission 9. The confession, the collapse, and the wedding no one saw coming. There are 3 moments in life that change everything. When the truth is spoken, when a kingdom falls, and when someone says, "I do," when no one expected them to. This was all 3. The trial was coming to a close. After my mother's testimony, the air shifted. Thomas's legal team scrambled to suppress evidence. His lead attorney quit mid-section, and the judge, after 30 years on the bench, requested federal oversight, saying quietly but clearly, "This is bigger than a courtroom." And it was, because what was collapsing wasn't just Monroe Enterprises. It was an empire built on lies. Ethan's countersuit gained traction overnight. We no longer stood alone. Former employees began coming forward. Whispered NDAs violated at last. Engineers, assistants, even board members who had been pushed out, fired, silenced, began to testify. And the dam broke when Eleanor Monroe's trust fund, the one my father left me, was unfrozen. Hidden in those documents? It's a confession. Handwritten. Dated 3 weeks before Daniel Callahan's death. It was a letter from my father to the man who betrayed him. Thomas, if you're reading this, then you've finally done what I always feared. Erased what we built together to raise only your own name. But I kept a piece of the truth hidden. And Eleanor, she'll find it. You think love is weakness, but it's not. It's the only code you can't steal. One day, she'll know who she is, and when she does, your kingdom won't survive her clarity. I read it aloud in court. Thomas turned white. And in that moment, he realized he had already lost. The collapse. It wasn't sudden, it was cernical. Stock prices plummeted 43% overnight. A whistleblower report from the DOJ hit headlines. Monroe Enterprises under federal investigation for 17 years of patent fraud. The board resigned en masse. And Thomas? He was escorted out of the courtroom in handcuffs. Not for the theft, not even for the betrayal, but for perjury, tax evasion, and obstruction of justice. They say pride comes before the fall. But in this case, arrogance came with a metal gate slamming behind him. 2 weeks later, I stood in front of a mirror at a small church in Vermont. No press, no paparazzi, no Monroe logo. Just a white dress, a baby bump, and a bouquet of garden roses I picked myself. My mother zipped the back of my gown with shaking hands. "He's waiting," she whispered. We've never seen anyone look so nervous. When I stepped out, Ethan stood at the altar. No tie, no fanfare, but his eyes shining. He took one breath when he saw me and whispered, "You're real." This is real. The pastor began to speak, but I didn't hear much. I was lost in the way Ethan's thumb rubbed the side of my palm, and his voice cracked when he said, "In sickness and in health. Vow, when it came to speak now or forever hold your peace." The only sound in the chapel was the wind rustling through the trees outside. No objections, no more lies, only vows, and legacy rewritten in real time. After we said, "I do," Ethan leaned in and whispered something only I could hear. I hadn't left that night years ago. If I hadn't believed the worst of you, maybe none of this would happen. I touched his cheek, and I said what I'd been carrying since session 1. You hadn't left, I wouldn't be the woman who could stand beside you now. We didn't need a castle. We didn't need a crown. We had each other, and the baby who'd one day carry 2 legacies. Not stolen, not silenced, born from the truth. Outside the chapel, the media waited, not for scandal, but for a story of survival. And as we stepped into the sunlight, someone snapped the photo that would headline every outlet the next day. The daughter of Monroe marries the heir of Callahan, Empire Reborn. But the real headline was written in our hearts. We loved, we lost, we lived. And now, we laughed together. Mission 10. The baby, the boardroom, and the brand Rebrand. They say empires are built in boardrooms. But ours? It began in a hospital room, with a scream, a breath, and a name. The baby. It was snowing the morning she came. March 3rd, 6:22 a.m. The world outside was wrapped in white, but the world inside that delivery room was trembling with color, shaking with life. I then held my hands so tight I couldn't feel my fingers. But when our daughter let out her first cry, I felt everything. Pain, yes, but also completion. "She has your eyes," Ethan whispered, voice raw. "Up let your stubbornness," I replied, breathless. We named her Hope Eleanor Callahan. Hope, because that's what she gave us. Eleanor, because that's what was taken and returned. My mother stood in the corner, wiping tears she pretended not to have. She handed me a folded letter, aged, yellowed, delicate. I wrote this for her, for when the time came. It was from my father. To my granddaughter, "I don't know your face, but I know your spirit. It's in your mother's fire and your father's faith. If you're reading this, then love one. Remember that. No matter what boardroom tries to define you, no matter what name they try to take, you are not built on legacy. You are the legacy. Build something better." With all I have left, Daniel Callahan. I read it to her every night that first week. And every night she fell asleep with one tiny fist curled against my heartbeat. The boardroom. 3 months later, I walked into the Monroe Enterprises headquarters, not as an heir, but as its new owner. The federal investigation had gutted the board. The shareholders had revolted, and through a quiet, strategic partnership with several old guard allies of my father, we merged Monroe with Callahan Holdings. Merged, but not saved. Saved implied we wanted to return. We didn't. We wanted to reinvent. A new logo? No gold. No lions. Just the name. Hope. Not Monroe, not Callahan. Just one word, etched into steel and purpose. We fired half the C-suite. A dozen subsidiaries built on exploitation. And for the first time in the company's history, the majority of the board was made up of women, including my mother, including Ethan's mentor, including me. One of the men who'd tried to block me, once a Monroe loyalist, approached after my first address. "You don't look like your father," he sneered. I replied, "I look like the woman who buried him and rebuilt his dream." He never returned. At the brand Reborn, we didn't make headlines. We made hospitals. We opened a tech incubator for underprivileged youth, named after Daniel. We funded maternity housing for at-risk mothers, named after the woman who raised me when the world would have swallowed me. And every Friday we took hope to the rooftop garden, the same garden where my father once sketched his dreams on napkins, the same place I once cried alone, not knowing who I was. Now, I sat with Ethan, a sleeping baby on my chest, and 1,000 futures blooming before us. One day, a journalist asked me, Did you survive the collapse of 2 empires and still manage to love? And I answered without thinking, because love wasn't what failed. Lies were. And the truth never left. The final surprise. That summer, we received a letter. Hand-delivered, no return address. Inside, a photograph of my father, holding a toddler I'd never seen before. On the back, written in fading ink, "When you're reading this, it means she's old enough now. Her name is Clara. She's yours too." I looked at Ethan. He looked at me. And for a moment, we just breathed. A new story had just begun. Final words. This wasn't just about wealth, and this was about healing. About rewriting bloodlines in ink made from truth. About daughters and mothers and the women who walk through fire carrying more than their names. This was a love story. But it was also a war story, a rebirth, a redemption. In somewhere in a quiet Vermont farmhouse, CEO, a mother, and a little girl named Hope lived not happily ever after, but truthfully ever after. And that was better. Conclusion. A legacy written in truth. In the end, this wasn't the story of a billionaire. It wasn't about the boardroom or the brand or even the bloodline. It was about a woman, once forgotten, once betrayed, who chose to rise, not with vengeance, but with vision. Julia didn't just reclaim her name. She redefined it. She didn't just love a man who lost everything. She helped him remember who he was. And through their daughter, through the life they rebuilt from ashes, they proved something we too often forget. Family isn't just blood. It's who stays when the money disappears. It's who fights for you when the world calls you crazy. It's who believes in your truth, even when it's inconvenient. Love is never lost. It may be buried under betrayal or broken promises, but it can be found again, if you dare to trust. Truth doesn't shake when storms come. It may be inconvenient, even dangerous, but it is the only foundation worth building a life on. Forgiveness is not weakness. Sometimes it's the bravest thing a woman can do to let go of bitterness and choose to live free. You don't have to inherit pain. You can inherit love. Build legacy not on money, but on meaning. It's never too late to come home to yourself. Whether you're 25 or 65, your story isn't over. And sometimes, the ending is far more beautiful than the beginning. If you felt something during Julia and Ethan's journey, if a moment made you cry or smile or whisper yes, then don't let it end here. Please, like this story, to let the algorithm know it matters. Comment your favorite moment or quote. We love to hear your heart. Share this with someone, because we all know a woman who was betrayed, and we all hope she finds her truth again. This is for the women who were told they weren't enough, for the men who almost gave up, and for the children born from second chances. This is not the end. It's a new beginning, and you're part of it.